I'm not. There's absolutely nothing to fear. God is not a judgmental deity.
Hi, welcome to The Happiest Self. This is Cynthia Belmer. I'm going to present to you today someone whose work has absolutely changed my life and the lives of millions of people. If you're afraid of death, or if you want to know more about life after death, then this episode is for you. Neale Donald Walsch is a modern day spiritual messenger, author of 33 books on spirituality and its practical application in daily life. This includes the famous Conversation with God series, which has been translated into 37 languages. Neale's latest book is Conversation with God Book 4, Awaken the Species. Please welcome Neale Donald Walsch. Hi, Neale.
Hi,
Thank you so much for being with us today.
you're very welcome. It's lovely to be here with you. How may I serve you?
I know a lot of us have fears about what's going to happen after we die. A lot of us fear loss, especially if we lost someone that we really love. And I came recently to realize that from my own personal experience that I can't fully live life and really live my purpose as long as I'm afraid of death. And I know that a lot of us have that fear because we don't know what death is like, or we don't know what afterlife is going to be like. It's a very uncertain place, or uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty about that. So I wanted to talk to you about this, and I wanted to see, especially after reading your amazing book, Awaken the Species, about what you think or what you have learned about death from your conversations with God.
Yeah, let me begin by saying that almost all of my thoughts about that, and I should say the thoughts that I have received in my conversations with God, have been placed in a book called Home with God in a Life That Never Ends. And that is a book that I really encourage anyone and everyone who has an interest in this area of our experience to read, and to read fully and take notes on, because it really answers just about every question I ever had about this topic. What happens when we die? What happens in the so-called afterlife? What is the process of death about? What can we expect in our experience? What really is true about that? And I should tell you that I have no way of knowing, of course, uh, what is true. But I do have one way of, how would I put this? One way of guessing or imagining or hoping or feeling or having a sense of what may very well be true, because I had many years ago an out of body experience that described the entire process um, of leaving the body and finding myself in another reality. And I want to share with you and with everyone who may be watching this that they can access a full narrative. I'm not going to give it to you now because it would take too long, but a full narrative explanation, a complete description of my experience. They can find that at cwgconnect.com, which is an internet platform on which I talk to readers of Conversations with God. And on that platform, they will find the complete description of my out of body experience. But between that description and the concepts and ideas that are explained thoroughly in the book Home with God, um, pretty much any question you may want to ask me is going to be answered. But I'll be happy to do so verbally for you here, so that people don't have to go out and read the entire book. But reading the book would be very helpful to anyone who's really deeply interested. Now, what particular question might you have in this conversation?
Can you tell us actually a little bit about your out of body experience? Um, I've read a lot about that. I've read your experience on CWG Connect, and it's absolutely amazing. So, how do you define death, or what was your experience of, like the out of body experience, or what could death be like, if you may share with us?
Well, as it's described in the narrative that I put online, but in brief, without because it's way too long to get into. But in brief, you just suddenly realize that you're not dead, that death does not exist. At least what happened to me was I suddenly had an experience of being outside of my body and that I was not my body. It was a very powerful experience. It was an experiential understanding, not a theological or theoretical understanding, but an experiential understanding that I'm not my body. I was able to look down on my body and hovering above it and see that, oh, I'm not that. It was rather startling, I might add, rather surprising, shocking, maybe even just at the beginning a bit scary because I was looking down on my own body thinking, who is that? And how can I be looking at that? But then I came upon the striking and startling realization and the wonderful realization that I'm not dead, that I am still quite alive, very much able and capable and of observing and experiencing what's around me. So after that, I just flew off into Never Land, so to speak, into a whole different experience, which is described in detail in that narrative. But in short, the experience allowed me to know that I'm an eternally existing spiritual being without any end, and that I will always exist and always have existed.
When you say I'm still very much alive after that experience, the I over here, do you think it was the identity of Neale Donald Walsch, or it was a different
Yes.
I? Okay.
Well, it was at the outset. At the beginning, it was the identity of Neale. Then, as I moved more deeply into the fullness of the experience, I realized that my identity as Neale was temporary, but that my identity as a separate essence, a separate expression of the overall essential essence that I call God, would always be maintained. That is, I would never lose my sense of individuality. Although I may change my identity, my particular, like putting on new clothes, like
Yeah.
putting on a new wardrobe. So if I put on a new wardrobe, it doesn't change my body in any way. I still have the same body, but I'm just dressing it differently. And that's very much an analogy of how I felt when I went through my out of body experience.
Was the experience scary for you, like throughout the process? I know I read the narrative, but for those who haven't read it, and I hope that you would join CWG Connect, especially that we can get to ask you questions over there as well. But did you get scared throughout the process of it?
No, I
Okay.
wouldn't say I wouldn't say I was scared throughout the process. As I mentioned a minute ago, I was a little bit frightened at the very beginning because I thought, well, what's happening? What's going on here? I don't understand. And then there was just maybe a little bit of fear just after that when I went through what I call my tunnel experience, which
Yeah.
many people have described. I'm not the only one to have described it in this way. Um, but went through that same tunnel that others have described, heading with insane speed toward a tiny speck of light at the other end of the tunnel. And at the beginning of that process, at the very beginning, I thought, oh boy, what's happening? But as I got closer and closer to this light at the end of the tunnel, to speak in metaphors for sure, as I got closer to this light at the end of the tunnel, I realized that I was getting also closer to a feeling. It was the feeling of total acceptance and wondrous love and complete unconditional embracing of who I am. And I began to feel, understandably, less and less fear and more warmth and total love.
So what about you talk about this in your books a lot about the experience of oneness, but what I wanted to touch upon is the fear of having of experiencing heaven or hell. And I grew up Catholic, and I know that you grew up Catholic as well. And I think a lot of
Yeah,
religion.
but I gave up Catholicism for Lent.
Yeah. what do you have to say about that, especially through your experience with conversations with God and with your experience, with your out of body experience?
Well, there's nothing to fear. There's absolutely nothing to fear. God is not a judgmental deity. She is not a punishing deity. He's not some kind of a super being in the sky who's going to get you if you don't do things according to some shifting set of rules that changes from time to time, place to place, generation to generation, religion to religion,
Yeah.
and culture to culture. It's simply not what God is. So how I look at it is only one of two things can happen. Either I'm totally wrong about all of this, and there is no afterlife, and when I die, I just go to sleep and never wake up, which is fine. I mean, it's there's no fear there. I just go to sleep and never wake up. Okay, fair enough. Or I do wake up in a world, in an environment, in a milieu, if you please, that is filled with nothing but love and acceptance, wonder and joy, peace and tranquility, wisdom and clarity, and the sense of the end of separation for all time. And then I have the option of returning to physicality if I wish, but I no longer, even in physical form, have to worry about or be fearful of ever being separate again from God. So I think my singular and most important experience in my out-of-body encounter was the knowing that I would never again be separate. I never was separate. I'm not separate now, and I never again need to feel separate from divinity, nor do I need to fear divinity in any way. I made a comment in one of my books that I was never afraid of my grandma. It's not that my grandma didn't have any rules. She had rules around the house. She had things she didn't want us to do, but she certainly wouldn't punish us with everlasting damnation
Yes.
if we broke the rules. She had a way of dealing with that, which was very loving and very embracing, and very sweet, and had no fear attached to it on my part. So I like to say, and I said in one of my books, I like to think that God is at least as nice as one of our grandparents.
I love that you said that, and I started thinking more about this since I became a mother. And in my head and in my heart, I felt like if I am able to love my daughter that much, like how much does God love me?
Of course, of
So,
course. I mean, and the Bible puts it another way, but in the same
yeah.
in the same in the same framework. The Bible says in one of my favorite passages from Matthew. So don't go around asking, what are we to eat? What are we to drink? Wherewithal will we clothe ourselves? Each day has problems of its own. Look, consider the lilies of the field and their incredible raiment. Are they not dressed beautifully? And they do not work, neither do they spin. They don't spin cloth to create clothes for themselves. They're simply supplied by God with a loving, extraordinarily joyful, and fabulous way of being. And if God so loved creatures as small as these, would she not all the more love you? And that's one of my favorite passages from the Bible.
You mentioned, and can I read a passage from your book, Awaken the
No,
Species?
no, absolutely not. You may not read passages from my book without clearance from my lawyers and my publisher. Oh well, go ahead, just this once.
So God said in your book, Awaken the Species, as a person who's awake, you would not mourn the death of another, not even for a moment. You might mourn your loss, but not their death. But in fact, celebrate both the moments of love and joy that they shared with others, and the fact that they continue to live in free and wondrous expression of their evolutionary process. You would likewise neither fear nor mourn your own death for precisely the same reason. I really, really love this passage a lot. And I feel like something you mentioned one time with me over on a call, you said it's hard for us to think that about God because it's too good to be true. And it keeps coming back in my head, like yes, it's too good to be true. First of all, why
And
do you
do you recall God's answer to that? What she said when I said, it's hard to believe because it's too good to be true.
too good
Do
to
you
be true?
remember what God said in reply?
No. No, that's you
He-
telling me over the phone.
well, he said, if I can't be too good to be true, who can?
That's actually that's very true. That's
If
very
God
true.
can't be too good to be true, who can? By the way, while we are stopped here, just in case someone might be looking for the book, the title is not Awaken the Species. The title of the book is Conversations with God, Book 4,
Yeah.
Awaken the Species. So Awaken the Species is the subtitle or the drop line on the cover, but I don't want people to go out there trying to find a book called Awaken the Species because they won't find it.
Okay.
Conversations with God, Book 4
And where
is the
can they
book.
find it? Where can they find it?
Anywhere,
Okay.
anywhere, any online bookstore, and most concrete bookstores around the world carry the book.
So in this passage, it's really hard for someone who's mourning, who's who recently lost someone. I feel it's really hard for them to accept this, to ac-
Really?
to accept that you might mourn their loss. Like you might mourn their loss, but you should be happy for them.
You
So
should be happy. You should be happy for those who have departed, not for
yes,
those who have
yes,
stayed behind.
yes,
Yeah,
right.
I haven't found that to be true. I have found that most people who hear this message are relieved, and they don't find it hard to believe or hard to
Okay.
accept at all. They find it very happy to accept it. They're very willing to embrace it. They're almost eager to believe it, and they don't find it hard to believe at all. I've had just the opposite experience. But when I say this to people who have lost a loved one, they say, "Oh God, thank God! I thought that must be how it is, but thank you for that confirmation. Now I can still feel sad for my loss, but I don't have to feel sad for them. I can celebrate their experience because I see now that they had celebrated their own continuation day." That's what Conversations with God calls the day of our death,
Yeah, right.
our
Continuation.
continuation day.
So what can you say, for example, for someone who's really mourning right now? What is what is
I would say to them, continue to mourn, continue to give vent to your feelings. Do not try to escape your feelings, but embrace those feelings of sadness, deep, deep sadness, those tears. Uh, Embrace all of that and hold tight to it. Don't try to dismiss it. Don't try to get over it. Faster than is natural. Don't try to step aside from it. Don't try to ignore it. Don't try to sublimate it. Let yourself have those feelings, even if they go on for a year or two, because those feelings are your natural expression. And if you try to sublimate them or ignore them, you're going to get yourself into emotional trouble. So don't do that. I would say let yourself have those feelings. It's quite natural. Excuse me.
bless you?
It's quite normal. It's quite natural. It's quite normal. And it's very okay. And I would say to them as well, of course, I understand how and why you could feel that way. And I want you to honor those feelings because those feelings honor the love you had for that person. They also honor who you are. What kind of a person would you be if you had no sadness at the
Right.
loss of a loved one? What would that say about you? So I would say honor those feelings and step into them and fully experience them in whatever way feels natural and normal and non-self-destructive to you.
Right. I think there is a big difference between sadness and pain. And from my own experience, sadness is so soft and sweet, whereas pain is so harsh. And this is when we're
Well,
self-inflicting.
I'm gonna make a little bit more of a difference if I can.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between pain and suffering.
Yeah. That's yes.
I don't think we ever eliminate the pain of loss. At least not a deep loss of someone very, very close to us. I don't know that anyone really can escape that pain, and nor do I think they want to. The day that I stop feeling pain at the loss of someone very close to me, it's probably not a good day in my life because it maybe I've removed myself so far from my own humanity
Yeah.
that I stepped outside of myself. I think that pain is totally okay. It's it's suffering that we're trying to eliminate. And the difference between pain and suffering is an announcement. Suffering is an announcement to the self, by the self, that what is occurring or what has occurred should not be occurring or should not have occurred. So I always liken this to a mother in childbirth.
Yeah.
She may experience pain, but once she understands that the pain is part of a process by which she is bringing new life into the world, she may reduce her suffering, sometimes even eliminate it altogether. So she might experience pain, but she may not experience suffering. And I watched my I watched my son's wife, my daughter-in-law. I watched her give birth. She had a lot of pain, but she, believe it or not, she was smiling, rejoicing. She was joyful at the pain because she was so in touch with the miracle that she was a part of, bringing new life into the world, that all the pain in the world couldn't dampen her joy at what was occurring. And it was a miracle to see that. Now, not all people react that way,
Yeah.
but she did, and she taught me a great deal in that moment of the difference between pain and suffering. She had lots of pain, no suffering at all. So suffering is a point of view that suggests that what is occurring should not be occurring. All we do is change that idea and suffering disappears, even though the pain may remain.
Why did God make it so hard for us to be certain about death or the afterlife?
I don't know that God made it so hard. I'm going to reject the premise of your question. You know, I'm not really into this old saying, mysterious are the ways of the Lord.
Yeah.
The ways of the Lord are not mysterious, and God did not make it hard for us to understand, because if God made it hard for us to understand, I would never be able to understand it. I'm just a regular person.
Yeah.
I'm an ordinary individual. I'm not a saint. Believe me, I'm not a saint. My wife would be very happy to tell you. I'm not a guru. You know, I'm not some kind of a spiritual master. I'm an ordinary guy walking down the street like everybody else. So if it was hard to understand, difficult to grasp, impossible to really embrace fully a knowledge of all this, you wouldn't be talking to me right now. So I think it's really rather easy to understand once we simply step aside from our prior notions about things. Let me explain to you something that I observe in human beings. Human beings, not God. Human beings make it hard. Your question was, why did God make it so hard?
Yeah.
God did not make it so hard. But human beings have made it hard to embrace these ideas about death, or to embrace, for that matter, any new idea about God or about life. Do you know there was a doctor named Semmelweis many years ago. Dr. Semmelweis years ago decided that he could reduce the mortality rate in the hospital where he worked, the mortality rate of infants. He was noticing that the children who were born, babies who were born, were dying at an alarming rate, and he looked at to figure out why was that happening. This was true not only at his hospital, but at hospitals all over the world. Then he decided, what if I washed my hands with antiseptic? What if I created some kind of a germ-killing liquid that could really eliminate germs from my hands? Well, of course, nobody even believed in germs at that time. Nobody understood, what's he talking about? What's a germ? So believe it or not, in that hospital and in hospitals all over the world, doctors were coming directly from operations on other people, where they were performing surgery and so forth, and then coming into the next room to deliver babies and bringing all the germs from that previous operation. And so he began to wash his hands with this antiseptic solution he had created between surgeries, and the mortality rate of the babies he delivered dropped way down. Do you know what? He couldn't convince the other doctors of his time of what he had demonstrated to himself. He couldn't convince them, because it was a new idea that no one had ever heard of, it ran against everything the medical profession thought they understood at the time. So they actually called him crazy, and they drove him crazy. Poor Dr. Semmelweis wound up dying in an insane asylum, in an institution, because he thought that maybe everything he had thought was true was wrong, and that he had deluded himself. Now, I bring up that example to explain why and how human beings have made it hard on themselves to embrace and to accept any new idea. There's one thing that human beings have refused to do in the area of their fundamental beliefs. They've done it in science, they've done it in medicine, finally, and they've done it in technology, but they refuse to do it in the area of their fundamental beliefs. And what is this one thing that human beings refuse to do? Question the prior assumption. We are loath to question the prior assumption. We simply will not do it in the area of our beliefs. We do it in science. Immediately we get a new idea, a new experiment is successful, and we put it to the test. A new idea comes along in medicine, a new solution, a new cure, and we put it to the test. In technology, the same way. But in our beliefs, no. New idea comes along, we put it to the test? No. We reject it. We reject it. We reject it. Because we refuse to question the prior assumption. Why is it therefore so hard for people to embrace the notions about God and about death and about dying and about the afterlife that we've been talking about here? Because they refuse to question the prior assumption, the prior answer that's been given to us by all the world's great religions.
Which
when
is
you're
what?
willing to question the prior assumption, suddenly your mind is open to new possibilities, and you no longer fear death, and you no longer have a hard time embracing these ideas we've been discussing. That's my 25-minute answer to your 30-second question.
So what are some of the assumptions when you talk about assumptions from the past, from different religions? Can you just give us one assumption and maybe some tips on how to move past that?
Well, sure. The basic assumption is that we're going to die, and that we will that life is then going to lead us to either heaven or hell. That we're going to be judged. The basic assumption is we're going to be judged, and that we will live forever for sure. But we either live forever in everlasting agony, indescribable agony, unending agony, or that we will live forever in a place of incredible joy and wonderfulness. But that's the underlying assumption. And behind that assumption is a list of other assumptions on what we have to do to make sure we get on the A list and not on the B list, to make sure we go this way and not that way. And so that's the second assumption. We have a whole list of these assumptions. We can, we have to believe in God in a certain way. Some of the assumptions are, we can't marry outside of our culture, outside of our race, outside of our religion. We can't marry someone of the same gender. We can't, all sorts of assumptions that tell us who, when, where, and how we may love, and who, when, where, and how we may not love, including loving God. And so the underlying assumption is that love itself is conditional, based on a whole series of conditions. Once we understand those conditions and meet those conditions, we're going to go that way. But if we don't understand those conditions and we don't meet those conditions, we're going that way. That's the fundamental assumption. I'm sorry to say it's a false assumption. It's totally, completely, absolutely, and utterly wrong, inaccurate. But that's the assumption that most people refuse to question. And they refuse to question it because they even think that even questioning it is grounds for going that way. You can't even ask the question. So your faith must be unquestioned. So there are those people who won't even ask the question because they're afraid that the very asking, the very doubting, will send them immediately to hell. In fact, there are some religions that teach that. And there are some religions on the earth that actually take you while you're in the body to a court, ecclesiastical court, spiritual court, and they sentence you to death and they kill you right then and there for apostasy, blasphemy, for being a heretic. So we've taught ourselves that to question the prevailing notion about God and what happens in the hereafter that's taught to us by the world's great religions is very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
But I don't have any problem questioning those things because nothing can ever happen to me. I'm not. I'm not concerned.
I have to recollect my thoughts now. You're making me laugh. So well, no wonder why we're like, even for me personally, I was so terrified of questioning anything, even though I've been meditating for so long, until like 4 or 5 years ago, and I had to go through very deep depression, which I'm so grateful for, because it shook me up. And this is when I realized that I really need to find my own truth. And this is when I realized that I really need to rebuild my relationship with God, because I don't even know how my relationship was. It was very destructive, and I'm still working through it. You know, it's not like I have the perfect relationship with God. I guess I have the perfect one for now, but and just my idea about God, and sometimes I notice myself regressing, and this is what I was asking you last time. I was like, do you ever doubt like what you talk about, or do you ever doubt God? Because sometimes I go through that and it scares me a lot, and this is when I regress to, you know, God's judgmental. I may go to hell if I'm doubting God, or if I'm doubting my beliefs about God. So no wonder why a lot of people really get scared of death.
Well, the answer to the question is, of course, I doubt. You know, I was asked that same question on a national television program in the United States called The Today Show by a television host named Matt Lauer. And Matt said to me, Neale, do you ever doubt? Do you ever doubt that you talk to God, or do you ever doubt what you imagine that you've heard from God? And I said, Matt, absolutely. The day I stop doubting is the day I become dangerous. And I have no intention of becoming dangerous. So, of course I doubt. But you know what? I then just say a couple of prayers and get closer once again to my original understanding about God. And if I'm wrong about all of this, okay, I'm going straight to hell. That's where all the interesting people are anyway.
You get to study them. I wanna mention one last thing from your book Home with God, because I think it's a very important quote, and I'm quoting it. God said, "You may use death as a tool with which to escape or with which to create." Do you think you can explain that statement?
Of course.
Yeah.
That was, I think, contained in the passage of the book dealing with suicide.
Yes.
That you can use death as a means of escape or a means of creating. People's ability to create their own reality and to create their own experience of themselves does not end with death. So in the moment of our death, we discover that our ability to continue to create our reality, that is to experience ourselves in the way that we choose, not only does not end, it actually is magnified, by 1,000%, because we're no longer trapped in the body. So they can use their death as a means of creating, but not as a means of escaping, because they will really escape nothing. If they imagine that by ending their own life in physical form, that they're going to escape, they're imagining inaccurately what's going to occur, because once they get to the so-called other side, once they're out of their body, if you please, they will realize that they came into the body for a particular reason, to experience and to express their divinity in certain ways and in certain circumstances and in certain situations, and that they were using life's circumstances and situations to set up or to create the conditions that allow them to experience their divinity in a certain way. So they will actually come back to life and recreate those conditions all over again. Happily, by the way, not as a punishment, but they will do so happily. I like to use I have a little joke that I tell around that, but it helps me to explain. I like to use marriage as an example. I've been married more than once. So actually, I've been married more than twice. So actually, I've been married more than 3 times. So I like to, actually, I've been married more than 4 times. So I like to use the actually, I've been married more than 5 times. So I like to use the example of marriage. Actually, I've been married more than 6 times. So I like to use the example of marriage. I'm now in my 7th marriage. People look at me and they go, "Oh my God," they're horrified. 7 marriages? Yes. See, because it's kind of like lives. Your wives are like lives. My little joke. Because then I just kept on doing it over and over and over. You'd think I would have enough. You think I would have enough of that experience. But in fact, I really got clear that I was going to do this until I got it right. It's like my wife said to me when I was making love with her one night. She said, "You will do this until you get it right." So it's kind of like that. And so I kind of like learned how to love, to be serious for just a moment. I learned how to love, finally, not by stepping away from the experience of marriage, but by finally embracing the experience and moving into it fully, without condition, without requirements, without a thought about how it should be or is supposed to be or has to be. I was able to step away from all of that, but only after, the honest truth is, only after doing it 7 times. And when my wife, we've now been married 10 years, so this is not a short-term experiment. When my wife was asked 10 years ago, "Why would you marry a 6-time loser?" She said, "Oh, my dear, he's not a 6-time loser. He's a 6-time learner."
Yeah.
So I consider the same concept applicable to the idea of death. That, when we do the thing we call die, we separate ourselves from all of the conditions and challenges and circumstances of physical life. But if we do so prior to the moment when it's perfect for us to do so, if we do so through the ending of our life, I want to say prematurely, I suspect that we'll just turn around and come back and do it again.
Do you think
Happily, joyfully, not as a punishment.
Do you think we'll be with the people we love when we die?
Oh my gosh, yes, of course. Not only will we be with the people we love when we do the thing we call die, not only will we be with the people who've gone before us, but Home with God said we'll also be with people who we've so-called left behind. Even they will be with us. I used to think, gosh, it really will be nice to be with my mom and my dad again, and my brothers and my family and those who have gone before. That'll be a very sweet moment, but it'll be bittersweet because I won't have my beloved family, my children, and my present 7th wife, and all the others that I've loved through my life, that I won't have them with me. God said, "Oh, no, you'll have them too." I said, "Wait a minute, how can I have them too? I've died, they continued living." And God said, "Oh, you see, you insist on imagining ultimate reality within the framework of time and space. Yeah. But I'm telling you that time and space does not exist, only in your imagining. That there is only one place, that's right here, and only one time, that's right now. Therefore, if you are always in the here and now, which you are when you're in the so-called spiritual realm, or what we call the afterlife, if that's where you are, suddenly all places become this place, and all times become this time, and there we all are again. Hail, hail, the gang's all here. We're all together once again, all those you have ever loved and all those you love right now. And then we get together and say, wow, let's go back and do it again. And we, in fact, reunite when we come back into physical life. We unite ourselves again. There's an old thought that Conversations with God confirmed for me, that we actually move through physical lives one after the other, with the same set of souls, so to speak, with the same, I'm going to just pull a number out of the air, with the same 100 people or 1,000 people, whatever the number might be, but the same people, that we travel together as really one oversoul, one soul with an oversoul, that we travel together. So that when we meet them again in the next lifetime, we look them square in the eye and we say, here we are again. I knew you. I know you. I know you from before. When my present wife walked into my living room the very first time, she looked at me and I looked at her. We talked about it later. We didn't say
Yeah.
anything then, but we talked about it later. She took one look at me, I took one look at her, and we knew. We knew. Wasn't a shadow of a doubt that we had been in each other's lives before, in an important way. We had been important to each other before. We knew that. So a week later, when she was driving down the road with me, and she turned to me in the car and said, I think we should be married.
Oh, after 1 week?
And I said, well, we had been friends for a while.
Okay.
After 1 week of really knowing each other,
Yeah.
I mean, personally,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
were dating. We were dating for about a week.
Yeah.
And after that first week, 7 days of really dating and knowing each other, uh, as only adults can,
Yeah.
she looked at me and said, I think we should be married. And I
Wow.
said, oh, sweetheart, don't say that to me twice.
Ah, wow.
I'm the marrying kind. And she said, no, no, I really mean it. I think we should be married. And I put my hand out to her and I said, done. And we got married the next day and ran off to
Wow.
Las Vegas, got on an airplane, and had one of those 24-hour marriage things in Las Vegas. And we came back husband and wife. That was 10 years ago.
Wow.
So, when you know, you know. And when you don't know, you don't know. But when you know, you know. You know. And you know that you know. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, the answer to your question is, yeah, not only do we meet those who have gone before, but we are united again instantly with those that we think that we have left behind. We're all together again. And it's an exciting and wonderful moment in the eternality when we decide how we're going to play the next time.
That's wonderful. I had a very similar experience with my husband and my daughter. We were not as fast as you and your wife, but it was a very similar encounter. And with my daughter, when I had her, I remember holding her in my arms and I felt like I have missed her. It's been like such a long time since I saw her. And then I kept wondering, why am I feeling that way? Like, where did this come from? But I really believe what you're just talking about, because it's like I still feel it in my heart right now.
Well, I believe it too. And of course, I could be wrong about all of that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Neale. I really, really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your work. I really appreciate you. And thank you for everything that you do for us.
Well, you're very sweet. And thank you for saying those words to me. It was nice to be here with you.